It's leveled the playing field between major label artists and baby artists. If you're consistent with creative content that fits for TikTok, you will grow. Hustle culture is extremely dangerous, and it's extremely dangerous for young entrepreneurs. And as an artist listening to this, you are an entrepreneur. It's your business. You're a business owner.
If something pops off organically and is like near the point of viral and the algorithm grabs it, that's obviously good for music. But do we want a world that the algorithm is in charge of?
People want to feel a part of something. It's not just TikTok. This is just general life advice. And I think like authenticity outweighs everything on the platform. People smell through the bullshit.
To put a win into perspective, you might be putting too much weight on, that one song that landed a great playlist.
It's like vertical Tinder, right? They're swiping upwards like nonstop. And so it's
vertical Tinder.
I just coined that on the spot.
Hey, welcome back to Progression, Success in the Music Industry. I'm your host, Travis Ference, and this is episode number 84. Great episode today. I chat with artist and creator manager and entrepreneur Sam Saideman. We get into a whole host of stuff like the dangers of hustle culture, the importance of authenticity in your content, having thick skin, doing brand deals, marketing your music via social media, and how TikTok is leveling the playing field between independent artists and major labels. In the interview, Sam also mentions that he likes to keep a macro perspective on things and how that basically keeps you from spiraling out from one bad turn in a project. And I'm not going to steal his thunder, so I'll let you listen to the whole interview for the full lowdown, but I do want to share something that has been helping me keep things in perspective lately. It's a bit macro, or I guess it's a technique to keep you looking at things from the macro. It's also one of the commitments I've made this year, which is to take reviews more seriously. So every day I now stop work 30 minutes earlier than I used to, and I review what got done, what didn't get done, and I reassess the plan for tomorrow. One of the hardest things for me to do is to leave my work behind when I come home. I've always had a hard time being present away from work if I didn't get every single thing I wanted to do, plus like 3 or 4 other things done. But you insert a child and a partner into the family equation, and that just doesn't fly anymore. So I think because we're creatives and we love what we do so much, we tend to let thoughts of work linger for way longer than they should. So to solve this, I now spend the last half hour of my day closing the open loops and taking a 30,000-foot view of how the day went. It forces me to leave the mix engineer who didn't finish the last recall chair and take the chair of Travis, the business owner. Because when you're in the midst of various projects, it can be super easy to get overwhelmed, even unknowingly, by the amount of work that needs to be done. So, what am I doing during these reviews? Generally, I take stock of what still needs to be done. I prioritize those things. I respond to or snooze emails, so I end up with inbox 0. I send invoices and I back up my hard drives. Don't ever forget to back up your hard drives. And by the way, if you're interested, I'm planning on doing a series of videos about my whole review system in the future, so be sure to subscribe to see when that drops. So, do you have to do all of those things? No. You can do whatever makes sense for your career and your life. But I promise if you do something, you will reap the benefits. So here's a few of the benefits that I've experienced in my life from doing this. 1, I move on with my day with a clear mind. I've closed all the open loops and I am ready to be present in the other aspects of my life, which is super important to me right now. 2, it helps me understand how much work I'm getting done. And with this knowledge, I can then better understand how much more work I could do and how I could best use my time. 3, I start each new day knowing exactly what the priority task or the target for the day is, which results in not wasting any time with that whole deciding what to do thing. So to close it all out, taking time to review your day will better give you a macro view of what's going on in your full career. Because when you go to work every day as John the songwriter or Jane the mix engineer or whatever, you are the boots on the ground and you can get caught up in focusing too much on the micro details of what is going right or wrong with specific projects. If you step back into the role of CEO of Yourself Inc., you can better understand what is working or not working as a whole. Maybe there are projects you think are moving the needle, but are actually holding you back. Or maybe there's something that you think doesn't need to be addressed because it seems to work day to day, but making a tweak could propel you forward. And you shouldn't just be doing this every day. You should be doing it weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. Like we've talked about before, this industry is all about the long game. So it can actually be really rewarding and encouraging to look back on a full year or a full quarter and see progress happen. So it's taken me a long time to find a system that works for me. I've tried a lot of different stuff. So before we go, let me share one more tip with you. Don't be afraid to dumb down your review process to the most basic and simplest thing that you can make sustainable. Because like I mentioned earlier, it's the act of doing something that is far more important than exactly how you do it. Today's guest is music entrepreneur and manager Sam Saideman. Sam is co-founder and CEO of Innovo Management, where he and his team specialize and work across artist management, project management, influencer management, and brand marketing. Currently, Innovo manages a roster of creators who have a reach of over 43 million followers on TikTok alone. His forward-thinking approach and his innovative spirit has helped him carve out a space as one of the most influential thought leaders in today's creator economy. So welcome to the show, Sam Saideman. Hey, Sam, how's it going?
Hey, Travis. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. You're in Nashville, I think?
I am. I've been here since 2014.
Nice. I always thought about going to Nashville, and then LA sucked me in, and I never left.
Yeah, that sounds like LA.
It's a vortex here. You try to leave and the traffic just keeps you. You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts about the creator economy, and then I think about like musicians, and they never really call themselves part of the creative economy.
Right.
And then on the flip side, whenever you do like watch a video or listen to a podcast about the creator economy, they kind of leave musicians out. Just curious, since you're kind of in that space and you're also in music, why is that? Is that to a detriment of musicians? Like what's going on?
I think a lot of musicians are skeptical still of short form content, you know? So as a content creator in 2022, it's almost all short form content, right? The creator economy across TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, Snapchat Spotlights, it's all short form content. And I think most musicians are still somewhat skeptical to the idea of taking this long form art that they spend, you know, weeks or months creating, spending all this time and money and blood, sweat, and tears on, and then turning it into these like bite-sized, spoon-fed pieces of content. But we try not to think of it as like two separate verticals. They're very much the same thing if an artist can come to terms with the idea of short-form content.
Well, I know you were a musician, and we'll get into your backstory later, but what do you think it is about musicians where they fight the short-form content thing? Because, I mean, even as a podcaster, like when I'm chopping up TikTok videos for the podcast, I'm kind of beating my head against the wall. Like, am I doing it right? Do I need to do this?
Yeah, well, there's definitely like somewhat of an age curve, I think. Like just the advent of when it became popular, like a lot of us were aged out of it feeling like a natural evolution in our skill sets. You definitely had to dig in and like learn a little, spend a little more time learning.
Yeah.
But I think it's the fact that like art as we know it as musicians or as people in the music industry is so much deeper and longer form than these short form pieces of content. And so I think artists especially struggle with the idea of having to create these like things that don't feel as thought out or as deep. But I think it's just the way the world is moving. Like you have to do both. But yeah, I think that's where probably artists struggle the most is like they spend all this time writing this song about something they went through or, you know, whatever it may be. And then they're expected to turn that into like a 30-second video that somehow, you know, tells that same story.
Yeah. Well, at the same time, these songs are getting shorter. People don't do bridges anymore. Like deep down inside, they know that the attention span to grab, you know, people is short. But yeah, I guess people just need to get over that bridge and get into it. And that's by the time we're done chatting, I'm sure they'll all be lining up to consider TikTok. They won't be lining up to get on TikTok.
Yeah, my goal is never to sell TikTok. It's to make people realize the importance of utilizing content to build audiences. So I have so many of these conversations in person with artists or over phone calls. And I never try to sell TikTok in the way of like, after this podcast, artists will be using TikTok. But you're right. I hope that they listen to this objectively and consider using it.
I've been enjoying it now that I kind of figured it out and I kind of like have accepted that I need to participate. It is kind of fun to learn something different because you really have to catch people in like the first 5 seconds, first 3 seconds. If you don't have something in there in the beginning to grab people, which is hard when you have a song. Like, what do you...
Right.
I mean, even the chorus isn't necessarily enough. There's got to be something, but we'll get into that. Let's talk about your backstory, how you got into music, how you ended up where you are now. You can, keep it short. You can keep it long, however you like to tell the story.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm an immigrant. I was born in London, England. You wouldn't know by my accent, but I grew up in London. I moved to New York when I was 7, almost 8. Fell in love with hip hop music in New York and how there was like so much depth around just the music. There was fashion and dance and art and all these other things that I hadn't seen in music before, or at least surrounding music. So I fell in love with hip hop music. I started making my own music and freestyling in parks and getting into like the battle rap culture in New York and all of that. So, towards my late teens, started putting records out and doing that whole thing. My brother's a filmmaker, and at the time would shoot a bunch of my content. So it wasn't short form then, but it was, pretty high level for low budget video content in music video form. And then over time, it landed on an assistant's desk at an indie label in Philly, and through a few calls, basically like signed this like independent, what I now understand as like an independent label services distribution deal where there was, a reimbursable marketing budget. But at the time, I wasn't well informed on the music business. I didn't know anyone on the business side of the music industry. So
Right.
I signed it and basically recorded a second project. Money never came, tried to sue them, the whole thing. So by that point, I had realized that I had lost my love for making music, and I kind of like retreated with my tail between my legs. I felt like I had kind of had my creativity like taken from me in that sense, because I had this short period of time to get the second project together. I forced out a project that didn't feel genuine to me, and then spent all this money to get it done and rushed it and put my life on hold in all other facets, and then just like everything kind of fell apart. So realized I was better at the business side always, did all my own marketing and sales and branding, but didn't yet connect the dots of like, you're on the music side of the music industry, there's a business side to the music industry. So eventually I made my way to Atlanta and just was like sharpening my general business background. I worked in like real estate investing. I worked in door-to-door sales for a solar panel company. I did some freelance social media marketing for like mom and pop shops. I was just basically sharpening my general business acumen and just like trying to become better at business, I guess. And through doing that, had, as corny as it sounds, had an aha moment where I realized there was a business side to the music industry that wasn't just built on nepotism. And so basically like found my way into that by like transferring and going back to college and studying music business and entrepreneurship, launched my company while I was in university, and then 2 years later dropped out for the third time. And, I was in school to run my business, and the business was starting to grow. So it felt kind of counterintuitive to dig a deeper hole if it wasn't necessary. So I left college, and then basically like I worked full time at Sony ATV Music Publishing, and then in the evening at a like 2,000 cap venue in Nashville called Marathon Music Works, and then weekends, mornings, late nights was doing Innovo. Through doing that, did some marketing projects as a consultant, and one of them went like super viral, and the distributor reached out and basically hired me. So I left Sony and went to a company called OneRPM, where I was working on the marketing team, and eventually moved up to running the US like artist strategy side, and then did that for about a year. And then June 2nd, 2018, went full time for myself, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. So I know, now Innovo is artists and influencers and creators. It started as music management mainly, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yeah. So I basically moved into music management. It felt like the easiest transition from being an artist, because I could empathize with the artist and what they were going through. So we created Innovo as a place to put musicians first. It was essentially an umbrella, so we could handle all of the business stuff and they could focus on doing what they do best, which is create art. Over the years, that's transitioned into many other things, but it started as just an artist management company.
Now, you kind of mentioned that you had a lot of like general sales and general marketing experience coming up. Are there things that you took away from that you think are valuable for independent musicians or up and coming managers to kind of wrap their head around?
I think the biggest thing, especially for this industry, is just having thick skin. Nothing prepared me more for having thick skin than having to knock on doors and try to sell solar panels. And keep in mind, this is before the popularity of like solar panels, and not in California. I did it in the Bronx, and then I did it in Atlanta for a while. Try to sell solar panels in the Bronx, right? Like it's not a thing.
Where are you going to put them?
Right. Where are you going to put them? And also, no one's got that kind of extra side money sitting around. So, and also it was pretty early in the solar panel, like boom. So people were still skeptical of like its long-term benefits in terms of cost savings. But nothing prepared me more, I think, for the music industry than that experience of like knocking on doors, having people slam the door in my face, or thinking I'm a like Jehovah's Witness, or all of these different things. So yeah, like coming into the music industry, I was pretty used to like hearing a million no's before I heard a yes. So I think probably that's the biggest like thing crossover in terms of lessons.
That is so, I mean, the faster you figure out that like failure is kind of inevitable on
Right.
the road to getting anywhere that's huge, especially in the music industry. I mean, God,
Right.
it's brutal. Everybody listening they've heard plenty of no's on their playlist submissions, no, whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
But there was a question I was going to ask you later, but since we're kind of like near it, let me read this to make sure I get it right. You did a post on LinkedIn that I saw recently, kind of had a graph of success. It was like a straight line, and it said, what people think it's like, and then a squiggly crazy line with an arrow. Yeah. And then, the typical like what it's actually like. And in there, you said that every win in your career comes with dozens of failures first. You kind of touched on that with the getting no's and doors slammed in your face. Is there something that you do to this day that when you suffer one of those losses or a failure or frustration, where you immediately turn that into a positive or a learning experience?
Yeah.
How do you digest those where they're not defeating?
I think if you asked me 3 or 4 years ago, the answer probably would have been different. But I think I've like really spent the last 2 to 3 years focused on like bettering myself, both mentally and physically, and like getting more mental toughness, which is necessary in this space. I think for me, it's perspective over anything else. Like I am such a macro person, so I don't really like get worried about the micro no's. Like those in the general landscape of your music career are pretty inconsequential. So I'm very good about, or very focused on, if I get a no, I zoom, and I'm feeling frustrated about it, I zoom out and I look at the big picture, and I realize like, well, okay, this publisher doesn't want to set up a co-write with one of their clients. What does that really mean in the grand scheme of things? We're not writing with that writer. Moving on, like
that's it.
Yeah, it sucks, but like how many songwriters are there in the world? Like, so I think for me, it's like really zooming out and trying to focus on the macro big picture. And I'm sure we'll talk about this, but that's where I see social media go so wrong for artists, is they start to like expect a certain engagement from one singular post because of how previous posts or their previous experiences make them feel or think. And then things don't always perform at the same level, or, things change, whether it be new algorithms or the way, the content is, or time of year, whatever it may be. And artists sometimes can focus so microly on like post by post that they forget, like, if you zoom out and look at the actual tangible growth of followers, it's always going up if you're posting frequently. The individual post engagement might look a little more up and down, but the actual long-term growth is always growing if you're consistent. So I always try to zoom out.
I think that's great advice. Everybody should write that one down and go back and listen to it. Because it's when you put everything in perspective. I mean, even wins. If you put a win into perspective, you might be putting too much weight on that one song that landed a great playlist, and that's just going to turn into a letdown later if you've really honed in. So I think perspective is really that's a great way to approach failure and moving on and flipping the script on that. Okay, so let's get into TikTok, social media. You kind of mentioned it. Specifically, let's do TikTok a bit because it's like the hot topic, right? If I say TikTok 5 times, my podcast is going to trend. TikTok. So it seems like the last, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the last place where organic reach is possible. Like even, I feel like Instagram Reels in the last couple of weeks, we're recording this in late October, have totally changed. Like my views have just like dropped off to like nothing, like I just started. Is TikTok the last organic place left?
I think there's still some organic stuff left on Instagram Reels and on YouTube Shorts, but yes, TikTok being the major priority there. I think that it's important to realize, like with a place like Instagram, it's gated because it's owned by Mark Zuckerberg. And if you're not spending ad dollars to Daddy Zuckerberg, then things aren't going to happen, So that's kind of how I look at those platforms. And TikTok eventually will be that. And artists who are just waiting for for I don't know what, the apocalypse to happen in terms of music marketing. The longer you wait with TikTok, you won't always have this upside. Eventually it will be gated, because why would they not monetize it in those ways? But right now the major benefit is it has an unlimited upside. It's leveled the playing field between major label artists and baby artists. If you're consistent with creative content that fits for TikTok, you will grow. And it's just a fact of the matter. You will find your community if you're consistent, you spend time on the platform, and you post creative, well thought out pieces of content. So I do think it works as well for Instagram Reels. And I know what you're talking about, because I repost, like I'll shoot something not on either platform and then post on both. And then on Instagram, it will, like, one video will get 7,000 views and the next one will get 3 views. And I think that's Instagram still trying to figure out how they can, like, weaponize Reels to, like, be a competitor with TikTok. So, like, they're prioritizing it and pushing it out. But then you're right, like, the ebbs and flows are crazy compared to other platforms. I kind of use the analogy, and I just had coffee with another manager this morning, and we were chatting about this. And one analogy I like to use is, like, not utilizing TikTok to promote your music or your brand would be like putting music out only on SoundCloud. You wouldn't do that, right? Unless you were like a DJ, right, and you were doing remixes. Like, you wouldn't just put your music out on SoundCloud. You would distribute to all of the DSPs. So why would you not utilize all of the platforms to reach people, you know?
Yeah, totally.
That's how I look at it.
Something you mentioned that if we can go back to when you were talking about TikTok, you said fits the platform. Do you kind of give your team and your artists kind of like direction, like, hey, this is something that feels like a TikTok. This is something that feels like Instagram Reels. Are you guys splitting things up like that, where you're kind of platform specific with content?
Yeah, but I think, like, it's not necessarily platform specific. It's like content style specific. So what I mean by that is, like, I personally believe that the same content that works on TikTok also works on Instagram Reels. So it's not so much like different style of content for Instagram and for TikTok, for Instagram Reels and TikTok, but it's more so like short form content versus like longer form. Like, I personally wouldn't post like a TikTok video on my Facebook wall, my Facebook page, or on, I don't know, Twitter, right? But like for specifically for short form content, places like TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels, I think they can cross pollinate nicely, and you can utilize one piece of content for all 3. But yeah, we're always working with our clients to, like, help shape and educate. I think the biggest thing, if I were giving any artist listening, like, advice on how to utilize short form content, the biggest thing, or the biggest mistakes that I see with it, is when you try to create short form content by just like taking a music video and chopping it up into like a 15-second bite-sized piece. Like, it's too professional of content for the platform. It needs to be authentic. The consumers on a platform like TikTok that's so Gen Z heavy, they're the first generation that runs away from advertisements. If it feels like an ad, they're not interested at all. So it has to feel organic and native to the platform. So whether that's like a selfie video talking to the camera, or it's concert footage from a cell phone that's, you know, a little less professional and edited, and, you know, then you're putting text over it or whatever it may be, it just has to feel organic and authentic to the platform, and DIY, because that's what people are attached to. And it's all narrative these days.
That's really interesting. Yeah, too professional. I never thought about that. I mean, you can fall into like the perfectionism circle when you're like, oh, I want to make sure this is, you know, looks really clean.
Right.
But yeah, I never thought about almost being less professional with posts. But you said the DIY thing, and it almost made me think about, like, you know, the punk rock, like, zine thing that was going on when I was in like middle school. Like, everybody wanted to make a cassette with no label and print, you know, their own little thing to go along with it and sell it out of their backpack. And I guess it's a Gen Z's version of that. It's So how can artists implement TikTok into their release strategies? I know I've seen a lot of stuff going on with, you know, just like reposting the same piece of a song that's about to come out with, like, sometimes with like text or graphics. Like, are there things that work? Are there things that have become cliches? Do you have any advice for people there?
I do, for sure. I think firstly, before you get into like specific types of content buckets, stick to narrative as much as you can. People want to feel a part of something. It's not just TikTok. This is just general life advice. People want to feel a part of things, right? They want to feel like a sense of community in anything. So when you're making music, most artists who are making music are making it with the hopes that people empathize with those lyrics or have a shared experience, right? And know what they're going through or help someone else go through the same or similar thing. It's the same thing with content. People want to feel a part of a community. So create pieces of content that fit in a community that you feel you're a part of. So narrative is huge. And I think like authenticity outweighs everything on the platform. People smell through the bullshit. And I think like with like storytelling on a platform, you have to have a hook pretty quickly. Like you were saying earlier, like the way people engage on TikTok, it's like vertical Tinder, right? They're swiping upwards like nonstop. And so it's
vertical
Tinder. I just coined that on the spot.
That's good.
They're swiping through so much content, right? They're lying on their couch, just swiping away. And if you don't hook them immediately, they're swiping right past. So one of the big things for like how TikTok pushes your content out for more cold or warm audiences on it is rewatch time. So what percentage of your video is being consumed? Is it 200%? Some like the average viewer watched it twice, or is it 12%? Right? That tells TikTok like how engaged or how interested people are in the content. So if you don't hook people quick, then your watch time goes down, and thus you're probably being pushed out to a lesser degree on the For You page. So back to the original point, I kind of went on a tangent. Narrative, I think, is huge. There's obviously like so many different styles of that, but like take something that's working on the platform and make it your own. Like we've all seen the car selfie video where it's like attached to have you ever felt this way? Here's my new song about blah, blah, blah. Well, there's so many artists who have taken that idea and turned it into something else. Like John Harvey, who's like a dude in Nashville who blew up from TikTok, and he did a piece around like the same thing, but a cop pulled him over because his song was so good. And he had like a cop pull him over, and it was him in the car vibing to the song. And it was a similar style, but he just made it his own. Or like in a more hip hop style, like everyone does the If I Featured On videos where it's like they'll take a Nicki Minaj track, add like just like a blank verse, and then they'll put their own verse on it. So they're attaching to like a moment of someone else's and showing what they can do as well. But there's an artist named Biddle, Biddl3, who did the same thing, but instead of like If I Featured On, it was sneaking into Nicki Minaj's studio. And then it was like her going to the bathroom, and then he like pokes his head around the corner, and then same thing. So it's the exact same content. It's just told in a different way. Right. And I think that's huge. Like I tell every artist, spend significant time on the platform before you ever start posting or planning. Spend time on there, see what other people are doing, sift through hashtags. After spending significant time and actually paying attention, you'll very quickly realize what works and what doesn't on the platform, and then just take those buckets and make them your own.
So you're saying people should do research?
Yeah, research is a necessary.
You got to do your homework.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That made me think about like collaboration and the there's stitches on TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm. And duets.
Have you seen a lot of artists like make genuine connections that way, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's I had a client who was like a producer as much as he was an artist, and he found this girl who was like singing this just like a cappella thing in her bathroom, and like with like crazy reverb. And he posted this, he ripped the audio and basically turned it into a remix, but he posted this video around like, I found this girl, she's dope, here's her singing, blah, 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 blah. And he built this like little like narrative love story kind of thing around the vocal. And he just teased a bit of the song, but like told the story of how he got it and what he did. And she found it. It went viral, got like over 2 million views. She found it. She had like way bigger following on the platform and as an artist in general. She reacted as a duet to it. And then he dropped it the next day, like, and then she did a duet to that. And then there was some chatter privately about putting the song out together, which never actually happened. But like he gained 60,000 followers on platform overnight. And like all these crazy eyes went to, like it just, the power of TikTok is insane, and people want to feel a part of something. So he did a great job of like finding something that he loved and other people loved, and built something that provided value to that community.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Speaking of releasing music, have you been in a lot of situations where something pops off on TikTok and has to get pushed out ASAP?
Yeah, It definitely happens more and more
Yeah.
these days, but I always try to start seeding the content like around a planned release date. So I'm not running around with my head cut off trying to like push the date forward. But like, this didn't go viral per se, but it's a perfect explainer of like the power of TikTok without necessarily chasing a viral moment. My client, Danny G, put out a song in April called Participate. He posted a TikTok like skit video because he has a following on TikTok for like sports skit humor, but it's not music related. And he posted this skit around the song, and it got like 150,000 views or something like that. So it did well, but it didn't necessarily go like viral in the truest sense. But it allowed us to like heavily lean into like TikTok lives and start like building this anticipation in this like smaller community. And we managed to get like 1,000 pre-saves through doing that. And then I was able to use my relationships and go to Spotify directly and say, hey, there's 1,000 pre-saves. Here's a video with like 100, whatever it was, 150, 180,000 views. And they supported it on like Fresh Finds and Fresh Finds Hip Hop, editorials. Nice. And that was just because of the data points that we could prove to them and show them. And the song came out in April, and we did like a sold out Nashville release show around it. It's getting more streams today than it did in April with editorial then. It's not getting editorial now. There's no TikTok push happening around the song now, but the Spotify radio has now picked it up on the algorithms, and it's doing like 15,000 or 12,000 streams a day right now, 6 or 7 months after release, just because there was all this data that came to them and rushed in, and then the save rate was super high. The restream, stuff was super high, like re-listening, and all the data was telling Spotify, like, you've got to push this out to more people. So that's a great example of like one that didn't even go viral, but leveraged the platform data to make other platforms care.
That's very cool. I don't know the best way to phrase this question. When it comes, everything's so algorithm based now, right? You talk about like Spotify pushes a song, the algorithm picks it up. You're getting your save rate, all those backroom data points that most artists don't pay attention to. Is this good for music, or does it support, like, if something pops off organically and is like near the point of viral and the algorithm grabs it, that's obviously good for music. But do we want a world that the algorithm is in charge of? I guess it's not really a question, but just a thought.
Yeah, I wrote a piece for Hypebot, and the title was "The Algorithm Doesn't Owe You, but it definitely owns you." And it's kind of that same thought process, right? Of like, this is just the world we live in. Like, I hate to be like the villain of that for artists, because no one likes to hear that. But like, this is the world we live in. So like, you either do it or you don't, and that's your choice. And like, if you don't, then figure out other strategies to do it. But it would certainly be a lot easier if you did do it for your career success and like trajectory. What I will say is like, this is no different than 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's just different issues, During the vinyl days, there were just different data points that they were chasing, and artists were having to like stand behind record sales, as like if they felt naked or powerful, right? Or what have you. And it's the same thing now with your Spotify showing your stream counts or TikTok showing your view counts. Like, just a different medium and different platform. But I think there's always been some sort of data or algorithm that an artist has to play the game.
No, that's totally true. Do you, as a manager of artists, are there data points that you feel really strongly are important to building a career?
I think organic streaming is huge. Like, what I mean by that is like, there's no budget spent yet to like get it to new organic audiences. Like, there's no like third-party playlisting or or digital ads or Spotify Marquee or Spotify Ad Studio. All that's great, and every artist should be doing as much of that as they can in the right ways. But as a manager, if I'm deciding if I'm going to be interested in an artist, or I am trying to latch onto like what's working with my clients or what isn't, like, I'm not necessarily paying attention to that as much as I am what's happening organically and how the people who are organically coming here or like coming from our socials are engaging with this music. So save rates are great. Follower growth on Spotify is something I pay heavy attention to. Obviously, we can't really see like what percentage of a song the average listener is listening to Obviously Spotify
Right.
can though. But I try to look at like follower graphs every day on Spotify, save rates and listener and stream rates. And there's now a new thing on Spotify for artists that's like shows you like your audience graph between like total playlist ads on like a period of time, as well as like listener to stream ratio. So like the average listener streams like 3 songs, of yours a month or what have you. So I think all of that is important. Same thing with social media, but again, I try not to focus too much on the micro and much more on the macro. So setting like monthly, quarterly, biannual, and annual KPIs, and then chasing those.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to kind of shift over to a hard change. I know you do a lot of work with creators and influencers now, and also matching brands with them. Can you share anything in that space about like, if you're a newer artist or a newer creator, are brand deals an option for you? If so, like what can you expect to be doing for what kind of payment? Or because I know my listeners basically probably know very little about this space. So whatever you've got, I'll
totally.
take.
Yeah. I'm happy to share as much or as little as you or your audience wants. So it's always a tough juggling act to determine like when to start taking on brand deals, right? Because there's tons of brand deals that look for micro influencers, and that's like 10K to like, let's say 50K followers on platform, or 10 to 100K. And there's plenty of deals that are like targeted towards that area. On our influencer side, we like on our exclusive management side for influencers, we typically don't sign under 1 million. The reason being is I don't like to I think that if an influencer is actively promoting brands too early, they can really hinder their growth, because the growth should be somewhat organic. And the more you advertise, naturally, the less organic engagement you're getting, right? So
Yeah.
I'm usually pretty cautious of like my influencers not promoting products or brands until the audience behind them are actual genuine fans of them, not just like fans of one video that went viral and gave them 20,000 followers. Because I think that's important. And also, if you're influencing people to go purchase a product, you want them to be fans of you, not just fans of a previous video. Otherwise, they don't care about that. So
Yeah.
I think that's huge. Obviously, it's like so different platform to platform, but our bread and butter on that brand deal side is TikTok. And we have like somewhere around 12 to 20 exclusive management clients on the TikTok side now. There's been some shift in the last week, hence why the range is so wide. And then we have like a non-exclusive rep side that we call priority influencer. And that we have like somewhere between 60 and 75 creators. And that like we're not representing them, but we're able to bring them deals at a certain rate and certain commission structure. So we're not commissioning everything, but we're commissioning things we bring them. And it just alleviates a huge weight off our back when we're running brand deals from the brand side and we need to get creators quickly in a certain niche. We have access to these like 70 odd creators before we have to go cold source creators. But rates range, and there's so many factors. Like timeline is a huge part, your affinity to the product or brand. Like if you drink Starbucks every day and Starbucks is contacting you to promote, you're probably more willing to promote Starbucks for less money because you want to be a part of that, right? Whereas if I'm a Starbucks drinker and someone's trying to get me to promote David's tea, or whatever, like Tiavana, I'm probably less interested in anything but higher pay. Yeah. So that's the first thing. Timeline is a huge thing. Like how fast do I have to get this video in? And then like a bunch of more like nerdy contract stuff, like usage rights. Like, are they getting the right to like repost this content on their socials? And then that's organic usage rights. And then you have paid usage rights. Like, are they able to run ads on your video or post it and then run ads from their side? And then like you've got exclusivities, like are you allowed to promote another coffee brand for the next 30 days or what have you? So we base our pricing like on a variety of things. Wow. It's certainly not just like make a price up. I would bet that there's a lot of people who do that, but there's quite a bit of like thought behind why we're pricing things the way we are.
I never thought about any of that stuff. That's really fascinating. Is it like, who's got more of a say when it comes to like the actual video? Like you're going to an influencer for their brand and their character, but then you're the one paying, it's your product. Who kind of, you got to come to some kind of like agreement
Yeah.
on
It's always it's the age old
so
debate right there. So typically how it works is like a brand or an ad agency or whoever it is that's like in communication with us is sending a creative brief. That brief has like we are doing this product and we want you to like do this thing, right? Sometimes it's very specific, like at the 7-second mark, take a sip of your coffee, then say yum, then blah blah blah. Those videos will always underperform, right? Because they're straight up advertisements and corporate
oh yeah,
feeling. Two,
yeah.
they don't align with each individual influencer's organic content styles. So when we're running campaigns for brands, we always try to like take what they need, like what's the macro goal here, and then turn that into a like something that gives the creator space to like make it their own, you know? And so I think those are the campaigns that most of our creators are more interested in, like stuff that
Oh
doesn't have
yeah.
a script, but it's like, hey, we want you to promote this arcade game, right? And then they can do it by like, if I make this half court shot, you know, you've got to download this app and do this thing. Or, you know, if I, whatever, or someone's telling a story while doing their makeup, like much more organic content than like, go play this arcade game and, you know, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of it. It's just, there's always a creative brief, but how thought out was the advertiser in that understanding of like organic content is always going to outperform.
Oh yeah. Well, it's, it goes back to the authenticity that you mentioned before. People can tell like something is inauthentic. And if you can present a product to somebody in a way that's like really entertaining and feels like that person, it's like at the end where you're like, was that an ad? Did they tell
Right.
me to buy that
Totally.
or not? I was listening to a podcast actually this morning, and there was a phrase in there: reputation first, revenue follows. Or it was basically that. And I think that really applies to everything you're talking about. Like you've got to have an established brand and a persona that you're going to stay true to.
Yeah.
And then you can really cash in on what works for your brand. But people they have to believe you and become like, the fan that you mentioned.
Totally.
Okay, so I want to just tag a couple articles that I found this morning in my research. You did a piece for Adweek about how brands have kind of changed their approach in the post-COVID world. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah.
In there, you said today's successful social media voice is no longer a means to get eyes on advertisements, but rather to cultivate and develop brand advocates. And it's the last bit, which actually kind of ties in what we were just talking about with reputation and brand.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for artists, producers, engineers, anybody in the music creation world where they can use some of these concepts that advertisers have switched over to turn their own fans and clients into advocates? Because that's really what you want, is you want everyone that works with you to be an advocate for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I do remember that piece. And it was actually co-written with my brand sales manager on my team, Matt Smith. So I just want to shout him out if we're talking about that piece. Yeah, what you're talking about there, specific to musicians, I feel like it goes back to that like community aspect, right? Like we talk a lot in that article about when brands try to oversell rather than just like focus on what makes them like unique or build a community around them, they fail, right? Like if you look at Duolingo is like the perfect example, right? They're not pushing their language training software or whatever. I don't even know truthfully what Duolingo do, but their whole brand, they have a huge social media presence, and it's because of that owl. They built a whole personality around their owl, and if you go to TikTok, it's like like sassy, funny content that goes viral all the time. And it just puts them in the right place to like be retargeting and focused on like getting, more people to like look into what they do from an interest level rather than a sales perspective. So I think it's the same with artists and artist managers. Like I try not to pitch my clients to labels or to agents or to publishers. Let that stuff come, because leverage is your best friend. And if you're pitching, you have none of it. And if they're finding you, everyone wants to discover stuff. So if they're finding you, then you have leverage. So it's like trying to find a way to build a community around what you're doing and making people feel a part of that. And then using that as a way to like net in these industry people who also want to be a part of that or see that as value.
Yeah, it's come up so many times on the show, leveraging, current success to, don't go begging publishers for deals and like knocking on every door. You're just going to get bad deals. You're going to get predatory managers. Like just sit there, Wait for everybody to come line up.
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, exactly. Last bit before we get into our last closing questions. Another piece that you wrote. You write a lot of pieces that I find on the internet, which is something that I think my audience would be really into. And it was called Health is Wealth: How to Move Away from Hustle Culture. And I talk a lot on this show about how, like I'm an engineer. I sat like 18 hours a day for like 10 years and like had all these pains, and like now I exercise and like I have mental clarity. Do you want to touch on your experiences with that in the music industry?
Hustle culture is extremely dangerous, and it's extremely dangerous for young entrepreneurs. And as an artist listening to this, you are an entrepreneur. It's your business. You're a business owner. So when I say young entrepreneurs, I'm also talking to the artists listening to this. Hustle culture is extremely dangerous. And when I started my business, I believed that if I out hustled, I would outgrow, right? I would grow faster than others if I hustled. And while of course more time typically equals more outcome or output, you burn out if you're not careful. And I did burn out. And, there was a point in my career where I was working easily 100 hours a week between full-time jobs, part-time jobs, and trying to run the business. I was burning the candle at both ends, attending networking things in the evenings, being at the office at 6 or 7 in the morning, smoking a pack of Newports a day, drinking in the evenings at the networking events, eating fast food on my drives between meetings because I didn't carve out lunch, sleeping like shit. And, I gained a lot of weight and I formed a bunch of bad habits, and eventually you burn out. And I talk about that a lot, and I'm super transparent about it because while that was me then, that isn't me now. And I think that's like something to sit with for every artist, is like, you are not defined by these things that you've used as coping mechanisms. You're defined by who you become and who you continue to become. And for me, I didn't date for years. I didn't like hang out with friends for years. And, now I'm in a long-term relationship, and we just bought a house together, and I climbed out of debt and lost a bunch of weight and quit smoking cigarettes. And I try very hard to keep my hours like as early as about 7 and as late as about 6, unless I'm attending networking things or what have you. Or it's like a really important thing. And, having clients and a team that respect that and like understand that, I think is key, because you can't be your best self for others if you can't be your best for others if you're not your best self. So hustle culture in that world is extremely dangerous. And I think it's important to realize it's not necessarily how long you work, but working smarter, out innovating people, that type of strategy.
Yeah, I agree totally. I feel like you described most of my 20s. And then I think something that people are afraid of is that people won't want to work with them if they put up the boundaries of like, hey, I don't work past 6.
Right.
And I think once you start doing that and you're like, hey, I don't work on Sunday anymore, and people are like, what the fuck? And you're like, well, I stopped. And then eventually they're like, oh yeah, Travis doesn't work on Sundays, or Sam doesn't work on Saturday, or whatever it is. It's like once you experience putting those boundaries up and see that people will respect them, and also be like, oh yeah, he works out in the morning or whatever, he takes care of himself or she takes care of herself. Yeah, just try it. Just try throwing some boundaries up with your clients, and I think people will be happy.
Yeah, and I think there's a right time in your career to do it, right? Like obviously, I know that sounds stupid, but like if I put those walls up too early, it could have been detrimental, perhaps. Like I understand that devil's advocate of like, if I were like not willing to put the hours in, maybe at the beginning it wouldn't have, but eventually like you have to put yourself first. And that's not being selfish. That's just like, if anything, that's being selfless, because if you're better, then everything else around you becomes better. Right. So, but I totally agree with you. And like, I try not to work on weekends, but of course, like as a manager, like if there's amazing opportunities that come up, I'm still looking at my emails. I may not be replying to every single one, but I'm still paying attention at the bare minimum. Yeah. And so, if something comes up that needs me, of course, I'm always around for my clients and for the opportunities, but I'm not opening my computer, I'm on my phone if I have to be, and that type of thing. And I'm not going to the office anymore on the weekends. If I have to, I'm just popping in my home office or whatever it may be, but just setting some walls up to like, let yourself reset and focus on things outside of work. Like I play soccer still. And, it's the only time I put my phone away and don't think about work in my whole life, and that's a beautiful time and a special time. And, my clients respect that and understand that. And I'm grateful that they do, because it's necessary to me being my best self.
Yeah. Especially if you're a creative, like you need to live, like you're a songwriter and you're not experiencing anything. What are you going to write about in your 3 sessions a day, 7 days a week?
Right.
Sam, this has been awesome. I got 2 questions I end the show with. Actually, this is season 3. 3 questions that I end the show with. One's a quick and easy one. Is there any music that you're really into that you think people are sleeping on? And what's on your playlist? One artist or album or something? I just want more people to listen to music. Yeah,
for sure. Man, I jump around so much. I'll plug one of my clients because I think that's my job.
Do it.
By around the time of this podcast coming out, my client Sammy Adams will have his new EP out. It's his first independent EP in about 10 years. So he was with RCA for a while and then some indie labels. It's his first independent EP in 10 plus years. So first singles this Friday, October 28th. And then there's one in November, one in December, a December tour, one in January, and then the EP early to mid-February. So Sammy Adams, the EP is called Good Problems, and it's pretty diverse palette of pop, hip-hop, and kind of electronic music. So I'll plug that for today's podcast.
Sounds dope. So the last 2 traditional questions to the show is, was there ever a time in your career that you chose to redefine what success meant to you?
Yeah. We just kind of spoke about it with like hustle culture. Yeah. I think that was that's probably the one that stood out the most to me in terms of like, just like something that was like, had a clear, like I was doing this is how I felt and looked and acted. And then I'm now doing this and this is how I feel, act, and look. So I think moving away from a hustle culture approach and moving into like a self-care approach is my answer there.
Love it. I agree with you. And then last question, what is your current biggest goal that you can share with us, of course, and what is the next smallest step you're going to take to go towards it?
Love it. I think I'm very focused on like social entrepreneurship, always looking for ways to give back. So like part of the story that I didn't fully share in my upbringing is like, I come from a lower middle class family, had some times of homelessness and evictions and everything else growing up, which informed the way I've acted as an adult with building a business. And I'm always looking for ways to give back and find ways to like do more for the community and the people around me. So I think for me, it's like just continuing to get to a place where I can help more people. The larger the business grows, the larger I as an entrepreneur become, the more people I'm able to help in my journey. And I think that's paramount to why we exist on this planet. So in terms of my macro goal, continuing to build my platform so that I can use them to help other people. In terms of small steps, I guess just showing up to work and trying my hardest every day.
It's good. Take the macro view,
there you go.
It's like the thing about progress and habits is it's like you can't tell that it's working until you look back at it, which I think is, the frustrating thing for a lot of people. That's why they change their mind. But Sam, this has been awesome. Please share with people where they can find you if they want to get in touch with you or any of your other artists or any clients or whatever. This is your little moment here.
Cool. Yeah, feel free to tap in with me on all platforms, but I'm most active on Instagram and probably TikTok. Both of them are Sam the Manager _. You can chat with me there, slide in the DMs. I always love to talk about music or business or anything, and always down to chop it up. In terms of clients on the music side, I'm repping Sammy Adams, Jonas, and Danny G. Hopefully that's still the case when this podcast comes out. On the influencer side, there's so many, but I'll shout out Naomi Arbide, who's a great beauty creator in Las Vegas. Marley Arnold, who goes by Masked Dance Tutorials, who's a dancer in Florida. And then Danny G, who does both music and influencer. He's on both sides of the company.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure there's links in the show notes to as many of those things as I can find. And I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been a lot of fun. I think people got a lot out of this. And
Yeah, likewise. Appreciate you having me.
So that's it for episode 84. Thanks to Sam Saideman for coming on the show. Thanks to all of you for listening. And remember, the most supportive thing you can do for the show right now is to subscribe to it in your podcast player or on YouTube or on both if you're into that kind of thing. Also, sharing it with a friend is huge. I'd greatly appreciate it if you would just consider texting this episode to one friend that you think would enjoy it. And finally, thanks to my editor, Stephen Boyd, for another killer audio edit on this episode. So I will see all of you next week.